Welcome to All That's Left, a podcast by Left Voice. I'm Sam Carliner. Today, we're going to be talking about the crisis going on in LA City Council. As some people may have heard, as it is now a national story, a private conversation of several members of LA City Council was recorded and leaked to the press. In this conversation, LA City Council President Nury Martinez and two members of LA City Council, as well as the president of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, are discussing the redistricting of the city, and over the course of this conversation, using racial slurs and talking with contempt and cruelty towards all of their constituents of various different communities. They really come for just about every oppressed community that there is. It's worth noting that all of these elected officials are Democrats. In fact, Biden, visiting LA and needing to say something to protect the Democratic Party's legitimacy, asked them to resign. Due to massive protests, as well as the role of organized labor, the two higher-up elected officials have resigned. It's worth noting that even as the president is requesting that these members, who are part of his own party, resign, two of the city council members are holding on to their positions. This is now causing even more protests to take place outside of these council members' houses. But what's most important is that their refusal to resign and the undemocratic maneuvers that they and the other elected officials were trying to put forward, and successfully did put forward in this recording, really calls into question how democratic of a country we really live in. What does it say when elected officials talk about their constituents with contempt and hatred, in a plan to pull maneuvers around the city that would take away people's democratic power? What does it say when, despite massive protests and literal calls from the president in the same party, what does it say when that is not enough for these city council members to be removed from office because there's no democratic maneuvers for people to recall elected officials that go against their interests? If this is a system that we should not be supporting, what can the people of Los Angeles, the protesters, organized labor, and really anyone in any city be doing to create a system that has leaders and representatives that actually come from our communities, serve our communities, and make decisions that benefit our interests, our democratic rights, our basic needs for housing, food, healthcare? What does that look like? Well, to answer those questions and more, I'm joined in this episode by Left Voice comrade, LA correspondent, and rank-and-file organizer, Julia Wallace. We're going to be discussing the crisis, the protests, and what a different way could look like. I'm joined by Left Voice comrade, LA correspondent, active in labor struggle and Black struggle in Los Angeles, a rank-and-file organizer at SEIU, and specifically SEIU Drop the Cops, where we are getting cops out of unions. I am talking about Julia Wallace, who is going to tell us about everything going on in LA right now. Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. You guys are doing awesome work, and really excited to explain what has been going down in the halls of City Council, in the streets of LA, and just help to clarify for the audience.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be getting into some of the larger crises that this whole situation represents. But first, just to start it off, in case people haven't been following, there is kind of news everywhere, but because this is really a very big national story, can you lay out the starting info, the spark notes of what exactly is going on and why is LA City Council in crisis?
Right, of course. So last week there was a recording that was kind of debuted by Knock LA. Shout out to them for their investigative journalism, especially about the sheriff gangs. More about that in a little bit. But there was a recording that was released that was made between three city council members, Nuri Martinez, Kevin De Leon, Gil Cedillo, and former president of the LA County Federation of Labor, Ron Herrera. And basically, they were discussing redistricting. And if what folks may not know is redistricting is a process which you would think was rather mundane, but it's not. I'll explain a little bit about that more. But it was redistricting that was supposed to happen in 2020, but because the pandemic was delayed. And they were kind of essentially carving up the city for their own political interests. And in their discussion of saying, well, we want this district to be changed so that it benefits us and who we want, they were bad mouthing their own constituents. They were talking about Oaxacans of Koreatown, calling them tan feos, saying they were ugly from little villages. Nuri Martinez specifically was talking about another city councilman, Mike Bonin's child, his adopted Black child, saying that he was a little monkey in Spanish, parece un changuito, and saying that he was acting up ironically on a Martin Luther King Day parade float, and that she would have taken him around the corner and beaten him. Just wild stuff. Talking about Armenian people, talking about Jewish people. She was saying, oh, these people, this candidate's with the Jews. These people are with the Blacks. And basically the four of them were conspiring to change the district so that they could essentially disenfranchise Black people for their own political gains and bad mouthing the rest of the city, the AAPI, Asian Pacific Islander communities, in the process. And so this recording happened a year ago, but was debuted last week. And because of the really racist and inflammatory statements that they were making, not to mention the whole perspective of redistricting, disenfranchising Black people, and dismissing Indigenous people and so many other groups, the people have been calling for the resignation of all of the city council members and have been successful in forcing the resignation of president of LA County Federation of Labor, Ron Herrera, and Nuri Martinez, former president of city council. And she's also recently stepped down from the city council completely.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, but I guess it's worth noting that last you shared, the two other members have not stepped down, and now people are protesting on those at their houses. And I want to explore that more in a little bit. But first, I really want to get into something that you just highlighted and also that you wrote about for Left Voice, and we can link this article in the show notes, which is that a lot of the news is an outrage is focused on the really vile, racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic.
That's right. They were also
everyone. They came for every single community.
There are also anti-gay remarks that they made. That's exactly right. They sure did. We're anti-gay too. Yep.
Community. But sorry, as I think is really important that you highlight, the role of the city council in LA, it goes beyond just racist statements. It goes into a systemic way of attacking people's power, of seeing communities and constituents as a way to secure your power rather than actually serving people's needs. And you've been witnessing and covering for Left Voice a lot of the anti-homeless attacks, LAPD's constant murder of Black residents, and
a lot of this is in the context of the upcoming Olympics, but of course, these dynamics have kind of always existed in LA. And I wonder if you can talk a bit more about the systemic role that this city council has played along with their comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people that have been elected on the city council, the comments that they made, they were incredibly comfortable saying them because a lot of these folks have been career politicians, and with unbridled contempt for their constituents. Since this scandal has broken out, on the one hand, there have been incredible protests, shows of solidarity between Asian Pacific Islanders, Black and Latino activists, Indigenous activists, community groups of all different multi-ethnic working class folks together to call for the resignation. At the same time, both Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo have refused to resign, and the city council does not have any means to force them out, which shows the real undemocratic nature of the city council in the first place. The fact that there isn't any kind of recallable process of the city council points to the undemocratic nature of it at all. How is it also that these city council members make, six-figure salaries in a population of a city count of Los Angeles that has immense poverty? They're walking distance from Skid Row, which is an area that I am often working in as a social worker. They're a walking distance. They're never there except for the holidays to give out some food. Cynically, they give out food at Christmas as if people only eat at Christmas and Thanksgiving. People have extreme poverty, and at the same time, the banks, Wells Fargo, finance capital, we have about 25 billionaires that live in Los Angeles. And so, you have a situation where people are extremely impoverished. And then you have extreme wealth like Hancock Park and Beverly Hills and these other areas. So, of course, there's a murderous police force, and the city council presides over it. So there's ordinances, as you touched upon, like 4118, which is an ordinance that doesn't allow people who are homeless to be within 500 feet of parks and schools, supposedly for folks' safety, but really it's to give a green light for the police to be incredibly repressive towards homeless folks. This was passed 11-3 by the city council. COVID restrictions were ended. This was passed almost unanimously by the city council, and LAPD's police budget was increased almost unanimously by the city council. So yes, they said these racist things, and that's totally abhorrent and should be opposed, but the policies of the city council, by and large by the city council, the raiding of Echo Park by Mitch O'Farrell, who is now the acting president of the city council, all these things show us that the city council itself are really shills of the landlords, the capitalists, and the police, and they're the defenders of the people who repress us. So it's no wonder they have contempt for the working class and oppressed. It's no wonder that those people, Republicans and Democrats, both of these capitalist parties, preside over squalor, because they both defend the capitalists and the police and the landlords. And so they really aren't a friend of the working class or enemies of the working class.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you do highlight also fuck the Republicans, because
Yeah.
we know they use these types of things, but we also saw Trump send feds all over the country to repress, well, it's Portland, all over.
They show pictures of Skid Row and they show pictures of squalor, like they basically juxtapose human beings to trash, as if human beings are trash. But they're not showing it because they want to house people. They're not showing it because they want more social services. But neither are Democrats either. They're not doing that. They just kind of, sorry, oh so sad. But like the thing is that the answers to those issues are to actually give answers to these really serious questions. It's not that complicated, but you have to take on the landlords. You have to take on the developers. You have to take on the capitalists. That's what you have to do. And none of these people are going to do that. None of them are willing to do that. And so because they're not going to do that and because they're not willing to do that, they, make bloated rhetorical speeches and at the same time make backroom deals to attack us.
I wanted to ask because specifically, again, fuck the Republicans, but I do want to mention something that you said, which is LA is a Democrat stronghold. California is, my understanding, a largely blue state. LA certainly, and Joe Biden,
he was just here.
Opportunistically, but has said these people in my party need to resign from city council and they're not doing it. And this really questions a lot of the legitimacy of the Democratic Party. And I wonder...
Yes, they're trying to use it in a way because the bar is in hell, right? The press secretary came out and said, unlike the Republicans, when our politicians say racist things, we hold them accountable. So it's kind of like, well, none of these people should be saying or doing racist things. In the meantime, the United States is preparing an assault on Haiti and is bombing Somalia. So, I mean, speaking of racist attacks, and has sanctions on Iran. So it's like, this is totally unacceptable. And, your racist rhetoric obviously is not okay, but they're trying to score political points in a situation where both political parties have had an all-out assault on the working class. Both have presided over a huge transfer of wealth from the poorest people to the wealthiest during this pandemic, during this crisis that continues to happen. And they've presided over it. So then saying, well, actually, the difference between us is we don't like it when our people say racist things. Yes, but both of you actually are okay with kids in cages. It's just now that the Democrats are in office, now you don't want to talk about it. But you're both okay with it. You're both okay with, military interventions around the country, around the world, excuse me. You're both okay with that. Both parties are okay with that. And then you wonder why there's a situation where, these are these close elections. It's like, well, you're both kind of in this situation where you both support basically the same things. And this is why we need our own political parties of the working class and oppressed people. We have to have our own political parties that represent the things that we actually want. In these recordings, and it's an hour long if you can stomach it, they talk about some of the most intimidating groups for them were the renters. And so why is that? Because renters are working class people. These are Black people. These are Latino people who are organizing and refusing to pay rent during the COVID crisis. And even after that, these are people, especially the LA Tenants Union, and I'm part of the Lenox Inglewood Tenants Union. Myself, along with my sister, who was a founder, and I'm one of the founding members, formed a tenants union to fight for rent control in Inglewood when we saw that they were building the SoFi Stadium, because we knew that they would start to jack up the rent, and we were right. These are working class organizations that intimidate them, and people that can form political power. Part of the reason why Ron Herrera, in my opinion, resigned first is because the union bureaucracy, they're intimidated by this perspective of workers finding out that part of the reason why our living standards aren't raising is because these people are co-conspirators and our living standards being lower and our dues money going to the Democratic Party who's attacking us. And I feel like, my union, SCIU, if we actually ran our own candidates, rank and file workers, using our dues money, so forget fucking Bank of America, Wells Fargo, all those people, we don't need their money. If we used our dues money for our own candidates, working class people, to fight for things like rent control, to lower rents, to higher rate wages, doubling the minimum wage. If we actually fought for those things, we could be running city council and we could be fighting for democratic organizing that would really represent our own interests, as our interests as working class people, as our interests as oppressed people. And part of this narrative, sorry to go on, but I just want to make another point. Part of this narrative that I've noticed happening is they're like, oh, Black and brown people, they're fighting each other. Oh my gosh, racial tension. As if the landlords don't stoke tension between Black and Latino people intentionally to keep people fighting each other so that they could raise the rent. As if the police don't intentionally, these are intentions, not just weird conspiracy stuff. They intentionally treat people differently in different neighborhoods to stoke tensions. When gangs have truces, these are gangs, Black gangs between each other, Black and Latino gangs between each other, they intentionally stoke tensions between groups in order to keep them fighting each other so that they don't organize themselves to oppose the brutality that people pose every day in their communities. So this isn't that there isn't some innate tension between Black and Latino people. These are tensions that are stoked by the ruling class and powerful in order to keep us as poor people and working class people fighting each other. So, and there's a ton of solidarity that's existed that I know I've been part of. I have many friends that are Oaxacan. Shout out to the Carry On family, by the way. What's up, Lalo? What's up, Lucrecia? What's up, Isa? What's up? Shout out to my people's OCDs, rest in peace. Grasshopper, rest in peace. Like, no, that's not true. There's a lot of solidarity that's existed, that's always existed between our communities, people who are fighting these people who are calling for the resignation. So I just want to also just point that out because there's a lot of nonsense that's kind of the LA Times and a lot of like capitalist media is trying to like portray, and it's false. So sorry for the rant, but I just want to make that clear.
No, I think that's really important. And I think, a lot of these news outlets, the capitalist media, isn't going to want to put forward the class analysis at play behind this. And that's part of the point of Left Voice and the podcast. So I appreciate you bringing it up. And I do wonder a bit more of, we're recording this Monday, October 17, and my understanding is the LA City Council was going to meet virtually tomorrow or wasn't going to meet. What exactly is the dynamic right now, both on the ground, really challenging these two remaining city council members to resign, and what are some of the tactics to try to keep that from happening that we need to be aware of?
Right. So as we said, so they don't have a mechanism to legally force them to resign. So of course people are protesting to force them to resign. So there's encampments that are happening at Kevin De Leon's home currently. And LA Tenants United is out there. Different groups are community groups are out there. And some of Kevin De Leon's like goon squads are out there. And the police are out there. So, we see what's what. The police are on the side of, the racists and the people who have contempt for the working class and Black and Latino working class. So that's the case. So they're there. That's happening. There's the J-Town Action Group, they're out there protesting as well. Kevin De Leon, I guess, has some other like safe houses because these people have money, our money, and they're using it to buy themselves houses around the city. So people have found other houses that this dude is like hiding out at. So they're going to their different houses and protesting. The Mitch O'Farrell has changed because of, she says, because of COVID. I thought COVID was over, but they said because of that, the city council meeting, which is tomorrow, is supposed to be virtual. But there's also calls for city council members not to attend so that it doesn't make quorum, so that the city council meeting doesn't happen. I think that I think that that's right, like that the city council should not be happening. These meetings should not be happening while these people are seated. It seems like Gil Cedillo, his term expires in December, so it looks like he's just going to try to just collect a check until December is what it looks like. And that does not surprise me at all. I mean, like I said, like these people, when you're a city council member or any kind of, elected official, you're supposed to be, and that's how you run when you're trying to get elected, is you are a bastion of the people and you're supposed to represent the people and all of this and that. And it's total nonsense, because it's like once they get elected, they're like, you're answerable to me. And they show total contempt. If people who are listening to this, I'm sure many of the people who listen to this are activists in the community. And if you've had experience with city council meetings, you know how contemptuous they are when you start speaking on issues like, real facts, right? People are dying because of the police. People are losing their homes. People are getting evicted. And you could see them looking on their phones, chitty-chatting with each other, laughing with each other, showing just utter disdain and mockery for what you have to say. No matter how real and sincere you are, the tears could be flowing from your face and they just laugh at you. Because actually, they really aren't interested in the concerns of the population. They're there to get a check, to move up the ladder, and getting elected is just part of that. And I think in part that's also why, besides participating in the political process, I think we as revolutionary socialists really need to expose the illegitimacy of like capitalist politics. Yeah, I think it's good for us to run for some of these positions. I think that's important, but also to show like the limitations of some of these positions in the first place. Like they don't represent us because the system itself doesn't represent us.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really important point there, especially because, the real big strategy being put forward by the left is that we should, well, there's a few strategies, but one I want to focus on is this idea that we should run within the Democratic Party, which you can touch on that. But yeah, run as socialists within the Democratic Party, and that if we elect enough progressive or socialist Democrats into city council, into Congress, whatnot, that is how we wield our power. But as you've touched on throughout the episode, there's a lot of the ways in which the power dynamics exist, that city council functions a certain way. And so I wonder if you can, again, you've touched on it, but really it's about some of, first of all, how do we use our power to fight these really undemocratic structures, and what type of, like, what should we expect from city council people? What should we be demanding to make them represent us in a democratic way? Yeah.
There's many different ways for us to engage in this political struggle. And I feel like it's kind of blown open the different ways in which this entire system is super undemocratic. So there's like one level, which is, of course, the ways in which city council is obviously undemocratic. The huge salaries, the fact that they can't be recalled, those are obvious ways in which this is super undemocratic. The whole perspective of like redistricting. And so these people who are kind of basically lording over the city like feudal lords, and where they're kind of fiefs, like that's another like level of of being undemocratic. But I think another thing is kind of for us as working class people who work or live in Los Angeles, how do we want this city to run, and creating our own kind of systems of discussing it and then figuring out how to do that. So like different kind of assemblies, workers assemblies or community assemblies. The members of the LA County Federation of Labor, I wonder if those workers could get together and discuss like, well, how do you want the people who are your elected officials to represent you? How do you want, as working people who work in Los Angeles, how should this be representing us, people who are community members, tenants of Los Angeles? How should the city represent us? We certainly pay a ton of rent. We're getting pushed out. People are getting pushed out of Los Angeles. Rent's too high. Like, why shouldn't it be a sense where rent should be lowered? Not just a cap on rent that's already too high, but rent actually be lowered. I think we really need to be kind of thinking outside of the confines of the capitalist system. But furthermore, I think that the Democratic Party has proven itself time and again to be the party of the capitalist class, and that there isn't a way that we can take it over when the banks, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, are the ones that are wielding their power over it. And so therefore we need to be using our power as working people, members of unions that use billions of our dollars, of our dues money, to say we want to form our own political organizations, that we do form our own political organizations. We kick the cops out of our unions, as we mentioned and you had referenced before, because cops aren't workers, they're strike breakers, they're evictors, and they're murderers of our communities. They're assaulters of our communities. And that we form our own political organizations that represent the working class, that are of the working class. And I think we have the ability to do that. We're in a position where we have to confront, and that we can confront, and we have the power to confront the mightiest with our own political might. And if we weren't powerful, then they wouldn't be having meetings talking about us. If we weren't strong, and if we weren't a threat, then they wouldn't be talking shit about us in these rooms, planning out, mapping out how they were going to disenfranchise us. If Black people weren't a political force, then they wouldn't be talking about how they had to undermine us and take us down. If Indigenous people weren't, it would be the same issue. So I think those of us oppressed people who got put down in those meetings, all of us working class people, we need to be doing that and coming together. And that's what I think we can do in Los Angeles and in cities all around the country, and joining with people all around the world. The working class is international, as the shirt says. Left voice drip.
Left voice drip. It's also my Twitter header design. Shout out Show Me, right? Show Me made that. Our comrade.
Shout out Show Me. Love you, Show Me.
No, and I really appreciate that. And you, being our LA correspondent, letting us know what's going on there, and also organizing within the community. And I want people to know that they can follow you at Julia_Furia on Twitter, Julia JUlia_FURIA. As well as on Left Voice. Read Julia's articles, listen to the podcast, share them. I really appreciate you sharing this perspective from on the ground, working class in Los Angeles.
Hey, working class, Los Angeles, Inglewood, solidarity to my people, solidaridad. La lucha obrera no tiene fronteras. Like, absolutely. And, you know, I appreciate being able to come on the podcast. We are here, out here, Left Voice. And, you know, it really is true. Like, there's so much solidarity between the working class, Asian, Black, Latino, Indigenous, and it really gets, the division gets pumped up. Also, you know, there's a lot of victimization that gets pumped up too, which is true, and it does happen. But the resistance, they always try to play it down, but there's so much resistance that's happening. And so, you know, check out Left Voice because we cover the resistance.